Hello everyone, Eric here from Iowa Robot Fighting. This week we'll be going over how the fights actually progressed, the details of the important items in the fight, what we learned about our robots, all of those details that we kind of glossed over last week. As you can see, I have a wide variety of bent metal in front of me, some of which is actually weapon bars. So let's go ahead and go over some of the details here in the videos. Now, again, I'd like to mention that the guys at the event were awesome. Guys, gals, girls, boys. It was a very close-knit community. Everybody was helping out everybody, which was super awesome all around. And I love when you see builders of any sort who are competitors helping everyone out. It means the world to me that people were willing to come up and ask questions about our robots. They were willing to answer questions about theirs. Everybody was concerned about everybody else's ability to fight, even after busting up their robots for them. I loaned out a variety of tools. We gave away a whole bunch of small parts. People were asking about our test box. It was an awesome community event, and we're really excited for the next one. We're looking at potentially doing a Midwest 4-state tournament series. And apparently that was a thing that kind of existed a decade or more ago that kind of just dropped away. So Iowa Robot Fighting, along with some of the other Iowa people, are looking at potential venues for hosting our own in connection with the Minnesota group. So there's a whole bunch of things that should be coming about and will be really cool in the near future. So let's dive into the actual breakdown of the fights. So one of the first ones that was really awesome for Evan's first fight, and as you can see, I don't have Horns of Jericho here. He took Jericho with him, and he has plans based on what we saw. But let's go into the first fight. So Horns of Jericho versus Professor Sparklebutt here. Now you can see he was able to get in and remove the weapon, but why? And that was because he lined up just right with the edge of the robot. And we slow it down even further. You can see he hits the actual housing on the side and hits the weapon again, sending it flying right there. And that is because upon further inspection, we found out that that was a 3D printed robot. Made it very easy to damage. As we found out, most 3D printed chassis that are exposed don't have any extra reinforcing, that are using PLA or even ABS, shatter very easily. And that was something that wasn't reinforced, easy to separate. Evan had a nice fight that time, ending in a great victory. And that was awesome. That was a great confidence booster for Evan, because he was very nervous, just shaking while he was driving. And understandable, because he doesn't have much experience when it comes to even driving RC cars. He's only flown an RC plane maybe 25 minutes in his entire life, and most of it was with me. And he's practiced very little with his robot. So being able to make it that far was awesome. The next fight, the Horns of Jericho versus the Cookie Cutter, with Eric from Dead Batteries Robotics, excuse me, was a little bit different. Now, I doubt you saw what happened there, but let's go through an instant replay. Evan made it around, tried to reel on him and do damage to his tire, and instead made contact with his armor. And upon making contact with his armor, threaded his own weapon into his body. Frame by frame, you can see exactly what happened. The weapon ends up, let's wait for the actual frame that it happens. The weapon ends up deflecting off of the aluminum chassis and hitting the polycarb that makes up the top glass breaks it, but it deflects the weapon back and feeds it in. And it's just enough to end up going into his body and ending up almost hitting his electronics. And from that moment on, he ended up not having a weapon. He turned into a pusher bot, and it was all good. We thought he was actually going to win. I thought he had a good chance because he had better traction in most instances, or at least was able to kind of shepherd him where he thought he needed to go. But then, the wheel falls off. Now that was a major issue with Evan's setup. The hubs work really well. I had no issues with my hubs. As you saw probably in a couple of my fights last week, that my hubs stayed put. Sometimes my wheels came off of the hubs. So it was possible to wrench down those hubs really tight. Evan just wasn't doing it. So he ended up losing tires a lot more often to hub malfunction, and that was all due to setup. So he kind of learned his lesson there. There's a lot of things with the wheels that we learned in that one. But as you can see from this footage here, there wasn't a whole lot of damage done. Wheel removed, and he popped that top panel off with his own weapon. Other than that, he was good to go. All he had to do was clean it up a little bit. Whereas when you look at the cookie cutter, he really shattered that top plate. He nearly killed the electronics, and I think he nearly hit the battery from what we were told. Now, my next fight, my first fight, technically, Little Twisty, was a handful. I had no idea what I was getting into, but I knew that vertical spinners were dangerous to my horizontal design. The instant he flipped me over, I was in a bad way. But what was interesting was when he did flip me over, he put me in a position in which I had to run myself into him to get flipped back. So I was constantly running myself into his weapon, and as you can tell right here, I can't spin up my weapon. If you look closely in some of this video, you can see that my weapon was bent, and then he ripped my weapon off, ripped my armor off, and right here you can see that he hits my rear armor and it ends up ripping off my front armor too, and that's a result of my overall setup. I'll show you my overall setup for armor, and I'll use one of my damaged ones to display this. I'll mixed with a fresh chassis. I thought I was being clever with this design in saving weight. I was saving weight, but I wasn't thinking in terms of rear damage. So he clipped me right on this edge right here. My armor, for my side armor, has a little tab which gets slotted in right here. So this front section is underneath my front armor. So when this got ripped off and away, it unthreaded these screws here, ripping my entire front armor off. The result being that I had to continue driving with no front armor. However, right about here is where he threw his belt. And I thought, great, I have a chance to win. Let's turn it into a pushing match. And I thought I was away from the pit, and he ends up finding the right loophole and jamming me straight into the pit, ending my first fight. In the images that follow, you can see the level of damage, just massive destruction. Now, this weapon bar is totally bent down because of being upside down. I ended up giving him this weapon bar as a reward, as a souvenir of the fight, which I only thought was fair. There's nothing I could do with it. But in subsequent fights, and you'll be able to hear this, listen to this, all my weapon bars got bent. Evan was able to fix my black and orange a little bit, but they're mild steel. The mild steel weapons meant that they could get bent very, very easily, mine and Evan's. Evan ended up doing some bluing of his blade, which involves heating the blade up and essentially tempering it so his blade didn't bend as easily. From this point on, we're looking at actually utilizing our forge and doing some honest bladesmithing. So actually shaping the blades potentially, but definitely heating them up and heat treating them and getting possibly 1055, 1065 steel somewhere in there with high carbon steel, and doing something that is a hard steel, hardened, so that we don't have to worry about the bend of the blade from this moment on. A lot of people use AR 500, and we saw that used to great effect, but many of those drivers don't have the facilities that we do, as we found out from them directly, to be able to form their own weapons. So future videos, you're going to see us doing forging of our actual robot weapon blades for 1 and 3 pound bots at the very least. So the next one up is Horns of Jericho versus Aardvark. Now this was a fascinating one. This is the one that I thought was going to happen to Evan at some point, or even myself, because of the height of our robots versus some of the others. Our weapons were placed really high, and as you can see right here, Evan has the hardest time getting his weapon to make any sort of contact. He's waving it back and forth, attempting to clip those wheels. Now, Ava did a really great job, and the whole Coop family did a really great job in coaching her, but she didn't have a lot of practice with the robot and ended up being defeated by Evan by a ring out. As I said last week, Ava, practice, practice, practice. It's all down to pushing stuff around with that robot. And I would expect if you put in 2 months worth of practice between now and the next fights where we see you, you're going to beat us. Especially if our weapons aren't able to hit you. We're going to try and remedy that. Don't you worry. We're going to try our best. But if you have a low robot and we don't, you're going to ring out a lot of people. So, that one's pretty straightforward. For the next one, Cowboy Beat Boot versus Destructo. And this is TJ from Team Superbad Robotics. TJ is the son of Rich. TJ is, I don't know his age. I know he's quite young. I know he's not a teenager yet. That's all I know. But TJ, as you could tell from last week, was the second place winner. So first was Ethan with Theseus, and Theseus is a very advanced carbon fiber robot. He's put a lot of time, money, and effort into perfecting that one. So he had a very good chance of winning just by tech alone, but he was a really good driver on top of it. It's all a high bar for the IRF team to try and reach with our equipment and budget-based builds. But TJ is just raw skill. And he got second place in the whole deal. But this is a great example of why he got second place. So let's dive straight in. Right off the bat, he powers up and box rushes me. His spin up was very quick, so he got me on the defensive immediately. I thought I had him right there. Let's pause it before we get into this. After that box rush, I thought I had him on his heels when I was able to send him flying. But that didn't last for long. As you can tell by the next scene, he took advantage of my design and the fact that I was trying to get away from him by shoving me up against this wall. I don't have a self-righting mechanism. I didn't think I needed one based on the fact that I could drive on my top and the fact that I didn't go over this in my build videos, but I have an eccentric back to my robot. So depending on Regardless of how I am set up, it's impossible to tip me. Even if I'm past what looks like the tipping point, it will still tip back on its regular, in its regular configuration. Even if they ended up tipping me over, I could still run on my top. But because of this, because my wheels are covered in the back, I couldn't drive off. So anytime he got me in this position where I was tipped up in the back, I was kind of screwed. Luckily for this first one, the rule was that there was an unstick, an arena unstick. So we were able to invoke that rule, get me broomsticked off the edge and restart. But right off the bat, I'm trying to maneuver, having the hardest time. I'm already upside down. Now I'm avoiding the pit. And TJ's doing the same thing, trying to get a good angle on me, and is able to hit me, slam me up against the wall, and keep on me until he rips off my weapon and stands me up in a corner again. And that was it. There was no recovering from that. I was done. And again, it's a testament to TJ and Rich's design. It's a testament to TJ's skill on the robot itself. I was very impressed, and he is probably always going to be a thorn in my side at these events, and I look forward to it. I'm going to have to build a robot that's able to withstand such things. I'm going to have to practice to figure out how to avoid such tactics. And he'll probably still adapt and beat me, but it's going to be a great time either way. So next up was Cowboy Beat Boot versus Trash the Dragon for me. Trash the Dragon had some electrical issues very early on, and my tactic here was very simple. I would use my front wedge to try and keep his weapon spun down so that he couldn't build up a good head of steam to get through my armor very much. And he did end up piercing my armor in a couple of places, here and here, but nothing major. Had he been able to spin up, had I stayed off of him, there's a good chance he could have started destroying my chassis. So I didn't want to let that happen. Unfortunately, I only got in a couple of hits, and then he hit me one last time, and that was it. He ended up not having any power from that moment on. It was all an electrical short or something disconnected. And Connor will have to, if Connor watches the video, I'd love for you to comment as to why that failure happened. But from there, I was able to kind of push him around. I pushed him onto the ring out pit, and I then came up and smacked him on the butt, trying to get his electronics up and running or to get the pit to free. One of the two. Again, I said this in the last video, and I'll say it again. Connor, I apologize if it looked like I was trying to do unnecessary damage to your robot. I really wanted the fight to continue, and I hope you accept my apology for that one. I know you were kind of upset. So next up from here was the Walker. Now, Pronghorn was an impressive robot. And Lucas had some really great skills with it, always able to keep Evan at bay. As you can see in the footage here, Evan is trying to get past him around, but because of, and I'll pause it right here, you can see the design of the robot on its, when you have a side profile like this. His weapon was his armor on the far side, and he had armor on the opposing side to fend off weapons like ours. He could deflect and cause someone to wear themselves down and slowly work his way around to bring that drum to bear. And if I remember correctly, the walkers get to double the weight of, they at least get a 50% advantage, if not double weight of whatever weight class they're in. So a lot of people who do that who are really good at building like Lucas is, they're able to take extreme advantage of that weight allowance. So Evan couldn't find his way around. He was able to clip a bunch off of the armor, but Evan's weapon spun down right here. He had an issue with, our weapons have an issue that if you hit too hard and the weapon comes to a stop, the ESC has to reset. And we need to figure out why that is and how to fix it. If it's an ESC switch, if it's a motor switch, or if it's just a programming thing. It's possible that we could fix that. However, Evan hesitated right at that moment and trapped himself in the corner. And as soon as he did that, Lucas took advantage and started ripping into it. And you can see right here, the drum is closing on that wheel and grabs that wheel and wrenches up. And then he starts grinding on the bottom. Really super slow-mo, wrenching up on that wheel really hard. And you can't really tell, but what ended up happening was the motor, let me grab a motor here. Our motors here are motor and gearbox. And he split the gearbox right here and ripped that completely free. And it was just holding on by a single screw. No gears were making contact at all. And as you can tell, after that, Evan had no control with that wheel. He flips over and now it's the left side of the robot and he's only able to turn in circles with his right tire. And he had to crab walk around the whole time, not having any chance at a victory. So, major driving lesson in that one. If something happens with your robot, get yourself clear before trying to fix it. He tried to troubleshoot and neglected his driving at that very moment, and that's what got him. Now, the Crixus fight here, I thought I had him at bay the whole time here. I spun down in a lot of instances just to use my wedge, and I kept getting under him. I thought I had him. I thought for sure. And then, sure enough, he ends up getting control of me right about here. As soon as he got under my armor at all, he started creating a rent in my armor, and you'll be able to see it right there. And as we slow it down, you'll see him grab my armor and rip it. And right here, you can see the rent in my armor that he grabs and throws up in the air, and then you can see that hole there in the front of my chassis. And again, as soon as there was a gap in my armor, he took advantage of it significantly and was able to continue to pound on me. So the major lesson we learned on that one, and you can see the armor right here. This is the precise armor from that fight. A typical armor plate is gonna look like this right here, nice and clean. However, and you can see that I have a broken chassis here, but you can see that there's an edge. That was our problem. Because there was this edge, as soon as this got fed up into a weapon, it was able to be ripped. And as soon as it was ripped once, it could keep getting ripped. So we're considering wrapping the front. There's a lot of changes we'll be going over in the next few weeks. As we start improving our robots and making design changes, I'll be covering each one of those steps. But one of the major ones is going to be my front armor. It's likely going to be steel next. And it's not going to come to that sharp edge down at the bottom. I'm going to round it underneath the robot, regardless of how the chassis is designed. Next up was our grudge match. So Evan and I faced off for the first time here, and I ripped his wheel off first thing. Rushed him, ripped his wheel off, and that was it. Now, Evan swears up and down that his controls were messed up, and I know that that was the case. Understandable. He didn't check things before we went to the box. We were going really fast. But again, major lesson, check your stuff before you get there. Our motors, apparently the polarity of the motors are supposed to be marked in the back, but they weren't marked well on some of them and were flipped. And because of that, we had some instances where we'd change out to new motors and suddenly they'd be going in reverse. And then we'd have to reprogram our radios. Evan's radio is not like mine. My radio has the ability to be reprogrammed on the spot, thanks to the Fly Sky setup. But Evan is running, what is it, the T6. He's running one that you have to plug into a computer to be able to reprogram. So he needed to make physical changes to his wiring setup in order to fix anything like that. A lot of the other things that we found in the competition was all down to weapon drive systems, quality of parts, electronics overall. The ones who were doing the best were doing belt drive with their weapon motors. They did not secure the weapon to the weapon motor. And we found that I was burning through weapon motor after weapon motor. And you can see, if we take a real close look right here, that we are missing a vital component. We are missing a bearing in the bottom of this. And that was not because the weapon motor got ripped out. That's because of so much torque being put on the drive shaft that it actually sent the bearing flying. In a lot of instances, I had at least 2 motors where the drive shaft from the motor got completely destroyed. And you can see in the bottom the bearing's still there. Luckily, I purchased a bunch of drive shafts for my motors, but we are definitely going to switch to a indirect drive. So we're going to do belt or chain or maybe even Brazilian drive, and we'll get into what that is in the future for our weapon, for both of our bots, which will mean major chassis changes, a whole slew of different things. So beyond that, we'll be diving into a lot of the changes in coming videos. I have plans of doing a redesign video sometime in the future. There's been requests from our local community to do a few different videos on how we built our test box, to how we how we did our wheels in depth, things like that. If you have something that you want to go over, anything at all about our robots, about the shop, any of the jigs we've created, any of the CAD softwares that we use, or anything like that, feel free to ask. I'd be more than happy to create a video specifically catered to our audience. So with that, again, I'd like to thank Scott and Alex for hosting Twin City Terror this last two weekends ago, and I look forward to seeing you guys again, either at one of your hosted events, one of our hosted events, or any of the other hosted competitions in the local area. But with that, you guys have a great day, and I'll catch you next time.